So going into that, Simon, I mean, why do we need to network in general? I mean, why do we need to network, as a treasury professional?
Well, I mean, I think networking there's a number of outcomes that come from networking, but even just from a simple perspective of information, like if you've got a problem today and you don't know how to solve for it, then having a good network is the best place to go so that you can help to get answers for that. So, it might be a very technical, specific treasury thing that you can't understand. And, if I've got a really good network, I can call 10 people and say, look, this is my problem. Have you encountered this before? So, that's a really simple way of being able to go out and get an answer without having to engage consultants or having to look silly.
Yeah, that's excellent. Joe, what do you think? You have anything to add on the why, or did Simon pretty much cover it there? And I muted you, sorry there.
Oh, no worries. So, no, I think he has it pretty well covered. It's you should always be networking even when you don't need it. That's the best time. And yeah, I don't have too much more to add. I think he covered it pretty succinctly.
One thing, Donnie, one thing I just wanted to say, like a really good example I've got for the listeners out there is I did a podcast recently with a guy who was super impressive, a banking background, and then he'd been a corporate treasurer for about 15 years. Now, in his world, he'd always had advisors and people around him that he could turn to when he had something he didn't understand. But then he found himself in a position where it was the right time for him to move on, and he just never really spent any time over his 20-odd year career networking. So he basically was looking for a new job with a blank sheet of paper in front of him. There was no real, no people he could turn to start conversations around what was next for him. So that's just a really good example of, if you're not networking, that's the situation you end up in. So, now I need a job, and obviously most people think about networking around getting their next job. But if you're starting to network when you need a job, it's the wrong time to be starting, because you've kind of missed the boat. Yes, you can go out and talk to people at that time, but it's going to be far less effective than if you've built relationships with people over a long period of time to be able to then go and hit that network up for your next job.
So with that being said, I mean, Joe or Scotty, when do you guys think is the right time to be networking?
So I think, first of all, I think that as a chronic overthinker myself, I'm gonna ask the audience here to do as I say, not as I do. But you don't necessarily need to overthink it. I think there's kind of a lot of gravitas that comes with the word networking, but at the end of the day, it's just getting to know other people. And most people would be surprised with the networks that they already have. So, everybody that you work with today, and especially those that you interface with, all of your stakeholders as a treasury professional, if you're working with bankers, those are all people that are part of your network. And I think that the key here is to make sure that, like to Simon's point, that you're kind of making sure you're building human connection with those people, and not just hitting them up when you need a job. And that's like the first time that they've heard from you in years or whatever it might be, right? It's again, for some it's easier than for others. For all of us here, we're professional networkers. We're probably all extroverts. So it's kind of comes naturally, but for those that it's a little bit more work, that's where it's like, you just need to put a concerted effort into asking others how they're doing and what you can do for them. Because again, to go back to Simon's point, we can talk a little bit later about how you can approach it when you need it. But ideally you're getting started way before you quote unquote need it.
Right. Being proactive rather than reactive to it. Joe, who do you think like is going to be your most advantageous person to work, to really network with?
It's going to be coworkers. It's going to be former managers. It's going to be, Scotty mentioned your bankers. Even if you're managing a ratings agency relationship, those would be good people to network with, because those are the people that you've had that common bond with. And in Treasury, you're so business facing. You have stakeholders in so many different areas. Everyone's aware of who you are, how you operate, what your capabilities are. And I think you may not realize that just because you didn't have that personal connection, or you don't know what their favorite color is, or you don't know who their favorite sports team is, that you don't have that connection there, but people do remember each other. So it's important to not only network with your previous coworkers, friends, family, all that type of stuff, but also peers. You know, it could be something as simple as just asking for advice. Hey, here's something I'm facing in terms of, I don't know, either a career challenge or something specific to a treasury strategy, asking for help and see who responds back to that. Put it out there, start asking for help. You'll be surprised by who comes back to you with advice. And then all of a sudden you remember that. You're going to try to help that person when they have a challenge, or maybe they're coming to you with a question because they know that they helped you out previously. So it's just anything you can do to foster those conversations with people who are like-minded and possess that same common interest or same common skill set with you. So, you know, if I'm an analyst, I'm probably talking to other analysts to find out what they're doing in the industry or what they're working on, because everybody's job is different at each company too. You know, it's within the same parameters generally, but everyone's going to have a different set of challenges or little nuances. And I'd probably be looking at your managers too, just because that's going to be the next logical step for you in most cases. And you want to know what it takes to actually advance in your career. That would be, I think that's a good starting point. Scotty, we were talking about this earlier. Did you want to pick up on maybe the more senior levels and what your thoughts were around that?
Sure, yeah. Just before I do, just to kind of quickly piggyback off of that, you know, to answer your question, Donnie, about who would be advantageous to network with, again, I think you can overthink it if you even think of it in that frame. You want to try and think of it in terms not of like who would be advantageous to know, because you never know who's going to go on and get that next job and then progress in their career quickly. Again, it's going to be folks that are like-minded and might have similar challenges. And if you really want to kind of go next level networking, then it's going to be folks that are not like-minded and also will be facing similar challenges. But yeah, Joe, to your question about folks that are more senior, and this probably gets into like more of like a mentorship, an informal mentorship relationship. But you know, a lot of folks that have kind of gone through their career and now they're in a more senior position, they really, I've had these conversations with many of them. They really enjoy giving back. So if they can help somebody that's starting out in their career, there's an intrinsic value to that alone. And they don't necessarily expect anything in return. What they get from that is way greater than what you may think they get from it, as you know, when you're starting out in your career. So I would highly recommend to anybody who's on the fence about asking a more senior person, maybe a treasurer, that they respect from a distance, but they're afraid to ask because they're worried, oh, this person's too busy for me. Just ask. You know, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? So yeah, I think that keep that in mind, because again, it's anecdotal, but I've had a ton of conversations with higher level folks who love to give back.
That's excellent feedback, Scotty. You know, you guys have all brought it up in some way, shape, or form of like, hey, we're all, you know, not all of us are built to network. Some of us are built more to network, some of us aren't, you know, and so the question is for those that aren't, and even those that are, you know, well, how do you successfully, you know, network? So my question, you know, to each one of you guys, going from Simon, Scotty to Joe. Simon, what would be like your number one tip on how to successfully network?
Start. Pretty simple.
Take the lead.
Pick up the phone, talk to people, get involved. You know, get involved in we had one of the Treasury Management Associations on last week. You know, get involved in different groups. Get involved in, you know, whatever it is that you think is going to be beneficial to start the process of getting out there and networking. And as everyone's kind of said, it's not about the conversation you have with someone today. It's where that leads you. And so, you know, it's just about having a mindset that networking is important and that I need to have conversations with people, that I need to be trying to help other people. You know, on the back of that, you will then end up having people come to help you, which is the outcome that you're overall wanting.
Yeah, it's a perfect segue into the tip that I think the most important tip that I can give, and that is right now especially, make a list of however long you want it to be. If you really feel like this is terrifying to you, make a list of 3 people that have impacted you thus far in your career, whether you know them personally or you just, they're a quote unquote virtual mentor, and reach out and ask them how they're doing right now. Again, it can be a list of 5, it can be a list of 100, but just give them a call or shoot them an email. Call's always better, in my opinion. I'm biased, but how are you doing right now? Is there anything that I can do to help you in your current situation? Just as simple as that. I think that you'll be amazed at how far that'll go.
Yeah, and for me, it would just be ask questions. It's you don't necessarily have to talk about yourself. I know that's an area of discomfort for me. I hate talking anything about my career or anything like that, but it makes me uncomfortable. I'll be honest with that. But ask questions about other people. I'm good at that. People love to talk about themselves generally. I know you have the exceptions like me. I think, Scotty, you're similar to that too. But just ask questions and see where it goes, because you'll be surprised what people are willing to share and what you'll find out, and where, to Simon's point earlier, where those conversations will lead.
Yeah. Kind of in that realm, one of the things that's kind of been pulled from the rug is your traditional networking event, where you can get into a room with people and interact, shake hands, have a beer, network. And usually, you have a beer or a glass of wine, everybody, tends to relax a little bit. But what have you guys been seeing? You guys have just given a couple examples from, reaching out, and some people, going into overthinking networking, we don't think of a simple phone call is actually networking, right? We think of that big event sometimes. At least that's my story. So what are some things, that you guys have seen with bigger gatherings, maybe digitally right now as a way to network? Have you guys seen anything out there, or do you think maybe there's an opportunity to facilitate something like that?
Donnie, 100%. I mean, that's the one thing that I'm hearing the most at the moment is people are missing networking. You can have work conversations. Everyone's getting on Zoom like we are now and having these sort of conversations in smaller groups. But what's not really feasible at the moment is to have large gatherings and, conferences and that kind of stuff that they can then have the automatic networking of that big group that you refer to. So I think from that perspective, that's why we've set up the virtual careers and networking week that we're having, August 10 to 14. You can jump on Facebook. You can jump on LinkedIn and register your interest for that if you're up for it. But we've got some pretty neat technology that actually facilitates doing these sort of networking events digitally. So thanks for the segue into that, but that's definitely something that we can do.
Yeah, so just so you guys are clear, in August, we are going to have an actual set of speakers coming. And then, like Simon said, we have some technology allows us to do some breakaway networking. So we're going to be able to, really deliver this. And the great thing about it is going to be all treasurers from, all over the place. And so to do that specifically, the best thing you probably do, right, Simon, is connect with you on LinkedIn, and then you can send them an invite if they're interested. Yeah, so if you guys aren't connected with Simon on LinkedIn, and could we drop maybe a link in this chat here below this video? Simon, is there a link for them to maybe just go do the pre-registration?
If they actually just go to the Treasury Talent LinkedIn page, and there's an event on the LinkedIn page that you can register your interest.
Excellent. Yeah, so we would definitely want you guys to come join us on that event. We're excited about putting that together over the next couple of months. Joe, what have you seen in the opportunity? Maybe if have you actually hosted like a little Zoom meeting like this yourself, Joe? Have you done anything like that for networking, or Scotty, anything like that over the break?
Yeah, a couple of them. And what I've definitely noticed is that with everyone working from home, people are more receptive to networking right now because you are kind of in isolation. You have your team meetings each and every day. But when it comes to actually talking about what's going on outside of COVID, outside of everything else that's going on in the world, people don't necessarily have that outlet because, at least up until recently, you've had a lot of stay-at-home orders and everything else that's going on, at least in the US we have. If I don't have Zoom meetings with Simon, or with if I'm not talking to Scotty or someone else in the industry, my networking calls, I'm essentially talking to my wife and my dogs all day. And it's one of those situations where people are craving, to Simon's point earlier, people crave the outside connection and just hey, what's going on? How are you? Like it's just that simple. And I've had so many deeper conversations that way, just in asking people, their thoughts around what's going on and what's been happening. And yeah, it's not Treasury related all the time, but it does foster deeper conversation that way. And it's been actually an interesting couple of months in that regard.
Yeah, excellent. We've got a really good question in here. It's from Fadwa. She says, networking is a culture in US and UK, but in the continental European countries, networking is more difficult. You could do it with peers, but it's more difficult with the harder levels. Could you please talk about this subject? Do you guys have any feedback? Because she's probably gonna have to get a little bit more creative on that. And we're getting some other questions coming in. So anybody have some thoughts on that one?
I think in that situation, like you're right, we do take it for granted that people are more open to networking. But I think if you take the approach that we said earlier, which is, what can you do to help other people? And if you can find, like Scotty just said then, if you pick up the phone to someone and say, how are you? Or just find a reason to be trying to help someone, that, everyone is happy for other people to help them, that no one's going to say no. And like we said as well, everyone generally, you fear people above you. You think that they're too busy or that they don't have time for you. The one thing that comes out in my podcast more than anything else around senior people is they are willing to give back. Most really good treasurers out there, the better ones, they're the ones that you probably want to chat to. Their whole mandate is around helping other people. They get more of a kick out of their team succeeding and their team progressing than they do of themselves. And that comes through time and time again. So in answer to your question, if you think that it's something that you can't ask, I disagree. Just do it. Ask the question. The worst thing that can happen is they say no. But I'll guarantee you that 9 times out of 10, even if they're super busy, they will be more than happy to help you.
Kind of a nice segue into that, Simon, is we've got another question. It was basically, if you're trying to network up and you're trying to go to a senior level, do you have specific lines that you've used? Like if you've never met this person in person before, right? They don't know who you are. There's no context to the relationship. It's kind of a cold outreach. Any good ways to get this person to interact and engage and get a response so you can actually network with this person? This is like marketing challenges right here.
Welcome to our business every day. That's what we do. So look, in answer to that question, it is literally what we do every day. So my strategy there is I would definitely send a LinkedIn invitation. I would send them an email. I'll find a reason to go to that person and I'll try and offer some value when I go to them with that. So I try and do something digitally to introduce, just so that it's not a cold phone call, and then follow up with a phone call. If you can get some banter happening across a channel like LinkedIn, that always is helpful. But yeah, I think you've just got to find a reason to speak to that person, and think of something that's happening at work that you've got a challenge in, and ask for their help. Whatever it may be, I think you just need a reason, and go into it trying to offer them something. I think is always better. If you're just going to them to say, I want, they may not be as receptive. Whereas if you're going to them with something that can add some value to them, if you don't have something that can add some value to them, just be open about it. Like, look, I'd really like to connect with you for the future. That's another thing that we do a lot is, it's not about the here and the now. We don't have to have a conversation now, but we would love to have a conversation at some point, because we want to work with you moving forward.
So I have a thought, and it's not a line per se, but it is an approach, and it dovetails into what Simon just said. Because to Simon's point, ideally you can bring them some value, but here's the critical thing to whomever asked that question: do a little bit of research on this person. Okay. There's plenty out there with LinkedIn and the internet in general to find out if there's somebody out there that you want to talk to. There's probably a reason for it. Address that. Listen to a podcast they've been on. Read an article that they've written or a post on LinkedIn. Just reference something that they've put out there in terms of why you feel they are the authority on what you're asking about. Because at the end of the day, that may not be actually doing something for them, other than, in full disclosure, this is kind of pumping their tires a little bit, right? So if we're, I guess, peeling the curtain back on a quote unquote tactic, if you will, all you're doing is proving that you're somebody who takes the time to do research, and you're also showing why they're the authority on something. And then you ask your question, ask for actionable advice. And here's the critical piece: go and take action on their advice, and then come back to them with what happened when you did. All right. Because again, that's going to show them your seriousness about it. So if you're going to do that, if you really want to have a conversation, be prepared. One, to do a little bit of research, and two, to actually take action when they give you some actionable feedback.
Yeah.
All right. Good stuff. Good stuff. We got another question. I was rolling off on a consultancy role, then COVID hit. Now I feel frozen out of the perm space. Any suggestions?
Yeah, I mean, that's a hard one. That unfortunately you can't create a job that's not out there. So, there's not a lot that's happening with Corona at the moment that, my advice is just get out there and network, get out there and talk to people. There are still jobs out there, but obviously volumes and focus right now has come back a little bit on, most treasurers right now are worried about their cash flow and liquidity, not recruiting. So there's not a lot you can do about that, but you can get out and have conversations and network, work around your network as much as you can to see if you can uncover anything that way. That would be my only advice.
Anybody else have anything on that, or is that pretty much covered?
Well, I think, again, that's a tough situation to be in. I'm sorry that you're in that situation right now. And I think the only other thing is going back to kind of what we already talked about. You're obviously actively on the market for a job. The hope would be you're leveraging your current network, anybody that that works at a company that is advertising for a job, for instance. But it goes back to, again, trying to be proactive in terms of reaching out to those that perhaps are going to be in a hiring position at the place where you're interested in going to work. At the end of the day, you're in a situation right now where your job is to find another job for the time being. So to Simon's point, there's kind of no shortcut around putting in some work in that regard.
Yeah, if you had moved over to the consulting space from the professional space, then chances are you have coworkers at some point, from the corporate space, chances are you have coworkers or relationships that you could probably tap at that point. Be an excellent time to reach out to nurture those. Depending on what you're doing in the consulting space, reach out to other consultants to see if they know of anything that's going on. I mean, to Scotty's point, it does become a full-time job there.
So follow-up question to that, how do you feel about a placement agency given a week of salary as a fee to market need?
I would stay well away from that personally, but this is my personal opinion. But a recruitment company should not be charging you to find you a job.
Anybody else?
Is that what the question is? Yeah, that's a gigantic red flag.
A good recruitment company is going to build a good relationship with you and help you out. They shouldn't be charging a fee for that. Let's see. So Tony had some good feedback. Use your network as banks also. They often have known positions that are available at corporates. Advertising. Good feedback, Tony. Thank you for that.
Donnie, can I just chip in with one other thing that I hadn't said yet that I wanted to talk about? Probably two things, actually. The first one is when we're thinking about this, think of continuous learning. Like, everyone should be out there trying to continuously learn to build themselves. And I think networking is a really good way of continuously learning. Like, everyone has got an opinion. Everyone's got a really good experience. If you're in the treasury space and you're talking to another peer, they've got things that they probably have done differently to you. So think of networking as a way that you can learn from them. I know when on my podcast, the whole idea of talking to people is to get information out there for other people to be able to learn from, because a lot of people have done a lot of things before you. And so there's a lot of things that you can learn on the back of that. And if you approach networking in a way that, you're looking at it as a learning tool for you, then there's a lot of really good stuff that you'll get out of it from chatting to people and learning from what they've done. And that can be the good things they've done, but it also can be the mistakes they've made. And by talking to people more senior than you, you can probably make sure that you don't make the same mistakes that they've made. So just think about that learning. And the second thing is, The other thing really good treasurers always say to me is don't underestimate networking within your own organization. A good treasurer understands the business. And so it's not necessarily about going out there and who's going to get you your next job, but they can teach you about the business and what they do in the business. And so networking within your own business is going to help you succeed in your job. It's going to make you better at what you do. And so don't underestimate what that looks like as well. So just a couple of key things I thought there, and I can't emphasize enough, this whole philosophy that every good networker that I've met, every good treasury person I've done a podcast with, always talks about paying it forward and what they can do to help other people.
Yeah, that's excellent. Excellent. And I think one thing to kind of add on to that, when we hear the word networking, it's like, what's the end result of being a good networking is to have a network. And when you have a network, you're really leveraging yourself throughout your career. You've heard the saying, I'm sure some of you guys heard the saying, your net worth is your net worth. And that's, if you're looking at networking, like if I can come away with one relationship a day from it or per interaction from it, then, we're playing it that way. It's a small game, little wins along the way. But just focusing on, well, what is the outcome of me investing this time and energy into it is that I'm actually going to build relationships and build a network that can really leverage. And if you do this year over year, day over day, there's a lot you can do for yourself, a lot you can help yourself out with by approaching it that way. Joe, looks like you were about to say something there.
No, I was agreeing with what you were saying. It's just it's showing up constantly. It's having those conversations and really just making a concentrated effort, making yourself uncomfortable to expand your own network and expand. Basically, you get more comfortable with it the more that you do it. And if you're continuously finding reasons not to do it, then it's just not going to happen. It's something that does take effort, and it's uncomfortable at first, but it does get easier.
Yeah. Got another really good question here.
Oh, sorry. No, it's okay. We can go with the question. I have two thoughts I want to mention before we wrap up, though.
Yeah, no worries. Recently taken a role as a payable officer, which is a step down than what I was as a treasury analyst due to the pandemic. Will this have a negative impact on my future career growth?
No, I don't. In my opinion, no. So yes, you've taken a step backwards, but it's an easily explainable situation. There's not anyone in the future who's not going to remember what happened during coronavirus. And so the fact that you've taken that job, when someone's looking through your background to say, why did you go from a treasury analyst to a payables role? The explanation is around the coronavirus. And you needed money. Of course, you're going to take a job. You're not going to sit around at home doing nothing. That's actually a more proactive way to manage your career as well, rather than sitting at home. You've done the right thing in taking that job. So as long as you can explain moves, people don't mind that you've been in a bad situation, and everyone's gone through coronavirus. So there should not be a person moving forward who sees that as a negative.
Excellent question. Thank you. Scotty, we'll go back to you there. And what were your thoughts?
Oh, yeah. No more questions?
Not yet.
Okay. So it's funny as we talked through this, I thought of a couple of things that I didn't come prepared with today. And like Simon, I wanted to just put these two things out there that we haven't talked about yet. So Joe mentioned if you are afraid to network, it's just not going to happen. But I think the one thing to keep in mind is I think a lot of times we think of it about how we present ourselves and what we can do and say. But if you think of it in terms of, now to tie in both what Joe said as well as what Simon said around learning, it's so much of it's about listening. You don't have to be talking to somebody else in order to network. It's really about taking the time, asking good questions and listening so that you can learn. And then if you can show the other person, not by, reporting back to them or anything, but just by illustrating it, that you've taken their advice to heart and implemented it, it's going to go a really long way. The second kind of easier way to go about networking, if you're really, if it's really difficult, is to think about the people who should know one another. So Donnie, you mentioned it. If you are learning if you're like meeting one new person per day, you're gonna grow your network, and there's no doubt about that. But you're kind of gonna be limited to linear growth. If you're introducing two people in your network and they get a ton of value, having met one another, that's gonna grow your network exponentially, and you're gonna be remembered as the source, right? Google's one of the most valuable companies in the world, and the whole point of their website is to get you somewhere else as quickly as possible. That's kind of what you can look at yourself as, when it comes to introducing others in your network who you think should know each other. So those are just the two things I wanted to make sure I mentioned before we got off today.
It's excellent feedback, Scotty. Joe, you have your last two golden nuggets, or?
No
pressure.
I'm not even going to try to follow up with that. That was good, Scotty.
Thanks.
Excellent.
I think one thing, Donnie, like for those, and again, focusing on those that find it hard, the introverts out there, it's easy for us that, that do this all the time, but for the introverts out there, just go to somewhere that's the least friction for you. So like digital platforms nowadays make it super easy to be able to do this. And, there's probably no better platform than LinkedIn from a professional perspective. If you're finding it hard, just go and find some people on LinkedIn that you think you'd benefit from having a conversation with and reach out to them. That's a good start. If you did that, even if you only reach out to one person a week, that's 50 people that you're reaching out to a year, which, it'll be hard for you to do that. But if you're just going to them and say, look, I'm just really keen to be a part of your network and would like to connect. That's as simple as it has to be. And you'll be surprised, most of those people will actually link in with you, and then you can start a conversation. But for those that find it difficult, just start the process. Get out there, start having conversations. It's not going to be natural for you, but start it digitally. Start with email, sending notes, whatever it may be. But just get started, and then you'll be surprised how easy it becomes once you do actually get out there and start.
Excellent. And thank you, Matthew. We're happy to provide this information for you guys. We're happy to do this every single week. If there's ever any doubt, we are a recruiting talent specifically for Treasury. So we want to make some clarity around that. We don't just come out here every day to hang out. We love delivering value. We love hanging out with you guys, but just so you guys know what we do, we are Treasury recruiters. So we thank you guys again for hanging out. We will be back here next week, right?
We will be.
That is true.
Yep. At 3:30? No, 3 o'clock.
3 o'clock.
I'm not sure if we've
Pacific.
got a topic yet. If anyone wants to throw a topic out there for us, we're happy to chat about it. I think, Scotty, actually, you may have some topics that we've agreed on. Sorry, I may be wrong there.
Oh, no. We definitely have no shortage of topics. But to your point, Simon, if the community has a topic that, we can easily bump that to the top of the list. We're absolutely interested in what you guys want to hear from us, knowing that we are Treasury recruiters, and that we definitely have no shortage of topics, but we're also happy to make a quick pivot if there's something that others want to hear about.
And on that, Scotty, today we're talking about networking. Our whole ethos is about sharing in the community and making sure that those in the community learn from us, and that the community is better as a whole based on the information that we share. So to some degree, we're really a networking business. That's what we're telling people today, isn't it? That's exactly our advice. And it's what we do. We're not making money out of this today. We're doing it for the greater good of all of you guys out there. And hopefully that we can help you guys in the process.
Excellent, guys. You guys drop your questions for next week in the chat below, or we should say drop your topics. If you have any topics you want to hear from us from next week, we'll throw those up the board. If not, we'll come up with our own stuff. Like you've heard, we have a plethora of them. But thank you again for hanging out with us, and we will see you all next week.
See you.